Logan Fischer. Thanks for being on the show.
Wilson Stern, thanks for having me, man.
It's a pleasure to have you on. I'm excited to talk about the stuff we're going to talk about. I want to ask you, does silence sound different on different types of media?
That's an interesting question. I would say technically that's a definite yes, depending on what you mean by media, because I mean, silence on a vinyl is not silence at all. And then there's always some level of noise floor on those recordings. So, I mean, if you take a silent moment in the middle of a song, for instance, you turn it up, you would hear something. There's very little, even if it's just coming from the playback device. I have never heard silence. And if you're like me, you probably have a little bit of tinnitus. So silence really doesn't exist for me. But I'm not sure if that's what you meant by the question. Like, what do you mean
That
by
was
that?
dead center exactly what I meant by the question.
Oh, well, we're off to a great start now.
And our answers would be the same. The noise floor for any piece of media for me is also the ringing in my ears.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. I am really good at ignoring tinnitus, but if I think it's kind of like and it's one of those things, if you think about it, you don't stop thinking about it for some time. At least that's my experience. So as long as I don't hear it, like right now my house is just loud enough that I don't notice it because I have like a really old AC. So it's like it's good for me right now. But yeah, I haven't had silence maybe ever in my, at least not in my adult life. But yeah, so you have a similar answer to that then. What would you say is like your tinnitus frequency? Do you know?
I don't know my tinnitus frequency. I have heard though that it changes over time, that it actually becomes a lower and lower pitch as your body decays.
That sounds actually like a great relief. Like I had not heard that, and mine's pretty high up there. Like I think it's probably around like 4K or 6K. I have, and it's a little bit different from ear to ear. I don't know if you experience an unevenness in the
Very
frequency.
uneven.
Yeah, so it's like, are you fortunate enough to have like a sonorous interval, like a nice major third or something? Or are you stuck in like minor nine land or tritone? Or because that would be pretty awesome if you were just constantly hearing like just a really nasty harmony all the time.
Oh yeah, I think it would have an effect on your personality. But that's something I
Yeah,
gotta check, see if I can figure out my ear ringing pitch.
it may be best not to be honest. In that case, because right now you're blissfully unaware of the exact nature of it. But then once you hear it, but I don't know. I mean, maybe it's in the name of exploration. It's good to know yourself. I found a bunch of resources because of that ringing in the ears that I've experienced for so long. I found a site where you could sweep frequencies and try to like match it. Of course, you can do that with any frequency generator, but then it would like make recommendations to you about different types of audio scrubbing that you can do to try to like mask it. So I don't know if you've ever explored that. But have you tried like masking your tinnitus with like white noise or brown noise or nature sounds? Or what's your opinion on that? Do you think that's a valid way to? I mean, really, you're just distracting yourself from it, but maybe there's some benefit to that.
I don't know. To me, that sounds like mostly just a distraction, but distractions are nice, especially if it's from the ringing in your ears, because that can become very annoying.
That's very fair. Unless you have like a really great, like if it's like an A4, that's in a lot of music. You can just kind of, if you have music in your head, that pitch is already somewhere in there, most likely. So something
That
right
would
in the middle.
that would be useful.
Yeah, yeah, you'd have like perfect pitch. Well, I mean, I don't know. Once it starts dropping, but that's another thing. Perfect pitch is another. It's a whole other subject. But really, the interesting question there is it better to have or not have? But you're asking the questions, but that's something that I find really interesting because then if anything's out of tune, you just can't help it.
Oh no, you're allowed to ask questions. It's awesome when the guests ask questions.
Well, you said don't be afraid to talk, and that's kind of my thing. So,
Yeah, no,
yeah, what do
don't
you
be
think about
afraid.
that? Do you have absolute pitch by any chance? I wouldn't be
No,
surprised.
definitely not. I have relative pitch that's pretty reliable, but absolutely not.
Okay, that's great because then you can enjoy your music in 432 hertz tuning. It's clearly what you got to do. Obviously, you got to get that app You know,
Yeah, if I had perfect pitch down to the frequency, I think the life would become disturbing to me.
right? It's almost like a curse because so many things aren't like a lot of artists, especially in the tape days, where that was like the medium for recording, would speed up or slow the tape slightly, um, just for the tempo of the song or to kind of affect the feel of the track. And you can notice this if you actually pick up an instrument and try to play along with like Mary Jane's Last Dance by Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. I want to say that one was sped up or something, but like it'll be like weird, not even a quarter tone, off, and you're like, how did they tune this guitar? Why would they come up with it? You're trying to figure out like how did they arrive at this tuning? It's like no, it's just a tape machine. It's just playing back really fast or slow, And so like, what would a person with absolute pitch do with that? Because you'd be aware of that difference, whereas most people are completely oblivious to that.
Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting though, because in theory, like a lower frequency, or rather slowed down, it should sound darker to the ear because there's like fewer joules of energy going into your eardrum per second. And so I wonder if
Right.
they perceive that. Because to me, if I listen to something at 440 and then something at 432, the 440 does not sound brighter, even though theoretically it should.
You said the 440 doesn't sound brighter.
At least not to me, but it should in theory, right?
Well, yeah, I guess because it's a higher standard of pitch, but I mean, it's only an 8 hertz deviation, so maybe that's kind of below the threshold for timbre shifts. I don't know. We're still used to hearing intervals of like a half tone, maybe a quarter tone. You get some blue notes and some bends in there, but anything shorter than like maybe 25 cents would probably, we're not quite used to listening to that.
What do you think an artist needs to perform their best in the studio?
You need to be prepared. You should know the music. And the only thing any musician really needs before they get anywhere else with it is a time field meter. If you develop meter, like you can always learn a lot of harmony and a lot of theory. You can dive very deeply into all of that. But music to me like happens. It's a temporal art form. So the canvas we paint on is time. And so if you don't have a good grip of that, then you're going to really struggle in the studio. Most modern productions require, or at least plan to use, a click track, a metronome, some sort of, metric accountability. So, and then you're going to be oftentimes playing separately. Most records now, I'd say, aren't made with all the people in a room together performing live, or if they are, that's a part of it. But then there's still a ton of overdubs. So you have like this layer on layer of people adding to and reacting to what already happened rather than real time. So they're not looking at each other. It's really important for a studio performer to have a good sense of meter and be able to play just consistent time. But that doesn't mean that you should only play like strictly with the groove. I mean, even if you're not playing with a metronome, it's perhaps even more important than in a lot of music and styles, it's idiomatically correct. So like let things breathe a little, push here at the bridge, pull back at the down chorus. Things like that are good for music sometimes. But even then, it's a misconception that those musicians aren't like really keenly aware of the time. Like a lot of those things are deliberate or just within a narrow enough range of deviation that it doesn't feel wrong. So I'd say meter is probably the most important thing, even more than being prepared. Like a musician with great meter can really wing it through a session because everything you play sounds better when it's in time. I use air quotes because in time is also something it's really up to the discretion of the musician. I think it's the choice of, if you have a beat, the metronome is right here. It's right in the middle. But if you're playing like reggae or a samba or something, your kick might actually be a little earlier or a little, later for some things. And the snare might actually be a little earlier and the kick is later. The bass might, the compression on the bass might be set in such a way at that tempo it blooms just a little after the kick drum attack. Little tiny deviations in the time are what I think contribute to a great time field, not just burying a metronome exactly, like trying to shoot a bullet with another bullet. people think of it that way and they get really frustrated with trying to practice with a metronome, but like have fun pushing that beat around and finding out whatever instrument you play, like where the pocket is for your part. That's a really important part of it. But yeah, that's my whole philosophy on studio recording is honestly, if you know 3 chords but you have a great meter, I'll take you. And tone and all of that, technique is important. Meter.
I want to get into the weeds about something because the nice thing about this stage of the podcast is that most people, I think, will see these episodes when everybody's second episode comes out. Right now, nobody's watching, which means that we can do whatever we want. And when people go back to this, they can fast forward because they've seen the other episode, and that's really the main event anyway. So you used the word bloom to describe the way the compression treats the dynamic of the bass.
Yeah, I just realized like that's not the most accessible subject to start off with, but I can't.
But let's do it. Let's not, because we don't need to be accessible. Talk about how a sound blooms, because it's so complex and there's a lot to talk about there.
Yeah. So while I was talking about meter and timing being the most fundamental part of performance, at least from my point of view, I'm a drummer and a bass player. So, I might have a bias towards the group a bit, but also engineers spend so much time like fixing this, or even when you have a great in-time performance, timing out the compression and reverbs and delays and things like that is a part that's often overlooked. So with what I was talking about, the compression blooming, I was referring to the timings on a compressor and the natural timings of the sound. So with a compressor, if you can, imagine the box, what they look like and what controls you'll find, but you'll find a threshold, which is, you set the signal level at which point the compressor acts on the sound. And then you set a ratio, which is, how much of compression is applied for every decibel that it goes over that threshold. Then you've got the timing controls, the attack and release. Some compressors, it's a fixed thing, but many compressors, especially digital plugins, will have those. And that's, the attack is how soon after the onset of the signal does that compression begin being applied. And then the release is how long does it take that compression to ease back off. So if you think of it almost like a rubber band, if you were to press into a rubber band, the attack is kind of how long it takes to really resist. And the release is kind of how long it takes to return to start, or at least go back to not acting in an inert state. So, if you play with those attack and release controls, you can have a signal where the initial attack, the smack sound, is barely present. And then if the release is set maybe to take a little while, you could have the sound being very compressed, meaning the level is very low. And then you could hear the compressor release. And it's almost like, it's not as overt as like a guitar volume swell, but you do hear the signal go a little bit. You might let just a little bit of the attack through, then squeeze the rest of the body just enough to leave, maybe your kick drum duration is like 40 milliseconds or so of like low end boosts or a punch that's coming out. And so maybe the bass kind of ducks out for around that time and then has a profile where it comes up. And it's probably shorter than 40 milliseconds. There's something I believe called the Hoff effect, where describes a relationship between sounds where if you hear an echo or a delay, for example, within 40 milliseconds of the initial sounds, it does not sound like two separate events. Echo, echo, echo. It's more like a slapback. Ta-da, ta-da. And so, it's within that narrow range oftentimes that you find the most action with a compressor. But yeah, to put a short point on it, when I was talking about the bass guitar blooming after the kick, it was because maybe it had a relatively fast attack time and maybe a medium to medium slow release time. And if you're playing a sustaining note, that kick is going to be sort of the tip of the spear, and then the rest of that arrow is the kick. And it might have some feathers at the back of that arrow shaft. But those are like really, really minute things that a lot of musicians aren't even aware of. And it's fun to talk about that with musicians because I find they are aware of it oftentimes on like an intuitive level, but they have never thought about like what's actually happening in those magic boxes. You go to the studio, you pay a lot of money, and just like happy that some smart looking dude is like turning stuff. Like I'm sure that's gonna be great.
But it is when you achieve that simpatico with your sound man at like a live event, say, and like he is treating the compression on the bass with like a mind towards how long stuff is taking and the actual tempo of the song. It's like you're on a vibe. You're creating this like big bass vibration that is like long and wide yet gets out of the way of the kick, and it's like you're creating this vibe for the entire room to participate in. And it's kind of like
Yes.
a two-person job because I'm on the stage, I'm not at the back of the room, so
Right.
I can't even fully hear the wave complete itself.
Yeah, I mean, people often don't realize that low frequency waves are very long as far as like how long it takes to complete one cycle, hertz cycle. So like, yeah, I mean, your bass drum, if you're in a room the size of this room I'm in, which is hard to tell how big it is, it's probably 400 square feet. Like anything much smaller than this, like you actually really can't get far enough away from like a lot of bass elements, low frequency sounds. Like you really can't get far enough away for them to even hear the an accurate representation of the low frequency. So you're really trusting your sound engineer. People often, I think, wonder why when they go to a festival or an outdoor event, there's like tents many yards out from the stage or in some weird spot that's just ideal for that engineer to hear the show. And yeah, obviously that's because that's the spot where they have a relationship to both sides of the system and they have enough distance. There's a lot of thought that goes into things like that. Um, but yeah, I mean, even in recording studios, you kind of should take the time to figure out what your mix position is, which is actually where I'm sitting right now. This is exactly where I would be sitting if I was mixing. Just kind of speakers perfectly
Right,
separate.
and if I'm correct, this is like the experiment where there's a wall in the water and the waves hit the water, and it's like they go through the slots in the wall and then they combine on the other side. And so it's a similar
Yeah,
thing here where it's coming out of both speakers and combining in the center to create this whole other image.
right. There's a phantom middle, and as far as like how stereo works, it's a really deep topic, but I think it's something that people also don't understand. We could go off into tangents all day, though. What was your initial point when we were talking about the live setting? That's right. You're talking about how the engineer is in a position to hear it, and you're just kind of you might have like a floor monitor just blasting you in one side of your hearing, or you might have in ears, but none of that is going to convey like what you actually sound like. And I don't even know if the crowd realizes that musicians are hearing something that usually sounds terrible. Even if it's a good monitor mix, like as a piece of music, it's awful. It's terrible sounding. But you're hearing what you need. Like there's no reverb on the vocals because you don't want to throw off your singing pitch. But like if the crowd had no reverb on the vocals, it would sound very awkward and strange on some songs. But if you actually knew what the musicians were hearing, you see them up there and they're like really getting some bass space and the music is awesome, band's killing it. And you're like, man, what does it feel like to be up there right now? And it's just Charlie Brown sounds in your ears. It's just a chaotic mess, and it looks and sounds glorious to the crowd, but it's not so flattering actually. But yeah, what is your experience with engineers? Since you mentioned that, obviously you're a professional musician. You have a lot of experience with engineers because that's part of your job. But you said it's a two-person job. How often would you say that you feel like there's that kind of sympathetic or synergistic vibe with your engineer? Do you feel like you usually have pretty good experiences? Like not even asking you to say anything bad about engineers or any person, but like as far as whether or not it's like you really feel that somebody is like picking up what you're putting down. You know what I mean?
I think it's rare because it's exactly that, picking up what you're putting down. It's somebody who is hearing your playing as a listener, but then ideally someone who's also some kind of musician, so they've got the rhythm to do it somewhat by ear. But then in addition to that, they've got to just have good like spatial awareness, like coordination. Like they've got to be able to actually visualize the wave coming out of the thing and then like walk around the space to
Right.
look and see if they're correct and if it's combining in the right ways and if it's getting bunched up in the corners and stuff like that. And so yeah, I would say it's not very frequent that that like perfect synergy happens.
Okay, yeah, that's my experience too. I haven't been playing quite so much. I used to play a whole lot more. It used to be my main profession was playing drums at gigs. And since engineering has been going really great for me for a couple of years, like I don't do that as much, which is probably best for my hearing too. But yeah, I feel like a lot of the time it's not even the engineers shortcoming. It's like just the nature of the gig. It's like you're playing a festival. It came together quickly. Somebody organizing it probably had some kind of major issue or oversight. Something didn't happen. Somebody got called in to do this at the last second. PA, some part of it didn't make it back from a rental. I mean, you had to improvise. Who knows what's going on, how short staffed they are, how much the staff is making. All of these factors go into that. And, you know, when you have 15 minutes to turn over a band, you know, the band is lucky to just get a line check, you know, where they just check that everything is not clipping. So you don't often get the opportunity to like sit in, you know, a good sound check at a venue with a sound engineer that knows the place. But rarely that happens for most musicians. I guess if you were touring the world with like a chart topping act or something, spoiled, and you deserve to be. But yeah, the vast majority of musicians are lucky if there is an engineer.
It would be cool if we could develop like the modern amphitheater, and I guess people are already doing this because there are spaces that are really, really well engineered. But now
Right.
in the new era of really, really loud, really, really clear sound reinforcement, it'll be interesting to see what the next like the coming decades bring in terms of spaces being designed to essentially not suck in the bass range.
Essentially not suck. Yeah, I mean, stop using like concrete on everything. Just concrete, just cinder block walls. That's one of my favorites. I played picked up the theater. Just cinder blocks, basically. It's like it was like playing in a bad reverb. Like if you've ever heard like just on a guitar amp or in a plug-in, just a really atrocious reverb or a really bad slap delay. Just like that's every single sound. Yeah, I really don't know because there is, you know, a lot of history and a lot of music venues. There are places that will always, as long as they're able to function, be a gold standard, like Red Rocks, which probably has great. It's probably one of the more modern spaces, or like the Ryan Amphitheater in Nashville. Again, another beautiful space, but like I think it's gonna, you know, kind of mirror the way a lot of audio production has gone, where we end up having technology that people 1 or 2 generations ago would consider science fiction, but yet yearning for the analog. Like in my main kind of profession, which is studio engineering, everything is about we're using these incredibly powerful modern computers and all of this very low noise workflow to get the sound of like old boards and old tape machines. And there's options on all these high-end plugins that allow you to bring in the analog noise artificially just so you can have it. And it's like this is stuff that people spent, you know, many hours of their lives like trying to minimize. These old school engineers like trying to deal with the noise floor on a 24 track tape machine or you know, just dealing with, you know, just line noise. And just there's so much of it in old recordings if you listen. And now we have the ability to basically operate at like a almost completely nil noise floor. And we're engineering ways to add hiss and noise back into our plugins or tape warble because we're, I think human beings, when it comes to art that is commercialized or is consumable as a product, which is, you know, most of what we consider music that is, you know, is in the pop culture is also a product. I see it as art first, but most people are conditioned with regards to popular culture to the standard is something that was really successful and really iconic and really, genre defining. And that's, going to be in music, that's going to be records recorded oftentimes in like 50s through the 80s. And the 90s are kind of getting that like gold dust treatment now. They're starting to get old enough that the nostalgia is more than just nostalgia. People are recognizing really great seminal works from that period as classic. It's getting played Pearl Jam's on classic rock stations now. But I just feel like people, in a way, fetishize this golden standard from the past. And at the end of the day, in the studio mixing and mastering side of things, especially, it's all about using extremely overpowered technology to emulate extremely underpowered technology, essentially. And I think with recording, we're going to see a similar thing rather with live spaces where, yeah, I mean, I'm sure state of the art facilities are being designed and built every day that are going to be mind boggling. But as far as the zeitgeist of the music consumer, I really feel like people are going to love venues that have a story. And oftentimes, venues that people love, I've been excited to go there, and I thought this would really sound very good. I think that we might have a skewed perspective on what people even like about going to see live. Because every time I go, I'm just concerned with like a little bit of clarity, like hear the vocals, how well are the PA tuned for what are we hearing as technicians. And I'll see crowds having an amazing time here. That was one of the greatest shows I ever saw. And I couldn't hear, to my standard, I couldn't hear very much in there. I really feel like there's this thing with audiophiles of any stripe where people are really eager to just go full on Jurassic Park with it, do it because you can. And, you've got Jeff Goldblum going, you didn't stop to think if you should, that's me. Like, hold off on, like the acoustically perfect space or whatever. You might just buy like, there's this venue called the Tabernacle in Atlanta, Georgia. It's like an old converted church, and I've seen like a metal show there. It was not the best sounding place that I've ever been in, but like, man, there was a vibe. And the mosh pits were vicious. The kids were feeling it, Wilson. They really were. So when it comes to that, I'm sure things that I've not even conceived of are already happening with the design of concert venues and just listening environments. But at the end of the day, that's still such a rarefied thing, and people are really going to be installing it.
Do you find the drummer brain is sometimes trying to take control when you're in the engineering room, and sometimes the engineering brain is trying to take control when you're in the drum room, or are you able to keep them separated?
Almost. The engineer brain is 100% dominant at all times with an iron fist. I almost don't have a drummer brain. I have to like really work to go to the place that I used to go to with drumming, because I think I'm too aware now of how easy it is for a drummer to clutter things. Whereas before, you're like, oh, this is really tasteful. All these like soft little ghost notes in between all these important beats, like that's tasteful. But then when you've been an engineer and you're like, dude, there is so much like hitting stuff happening in this song, and this performer is singing this beautiful thing, and it's just the whole time. So after I've had to waste, it was not a waste, but let me rephrase that. After I've had to invest inordinate amounts of time trying to make things like that work, even from my own mixing things that I play drums on, I'm just going, man, after a certain point, I just kind of had to make the decision. I'm going to try to think like an engineer at all times, or a producer. And if I'm ever thinking like a drummer and I'm not practicing, not rehearsing with the band, like literally at a drum practicing on my own, that's when I can have drum brain. That's when I can be like, let me work on some technique. Let me think about like, really technical stuff. But like if I'm with musicians, even one other musician, and I'm thinking like a drummer, I'm probably playing something really funny. And I'm probably not listening to the other person. So like right now, sorry, that was a long answer, man. But yeah, it's pretty much all engineering the whole time. Even if there are no mics, that's like, am I playing to the room?
That makes sense. I found myself thinking that way too. More as an engineer, more as a producer. Because there's a time I feel like when you need a little bit of danger, when you need a little bit of ego, that's where you kind of like let the reins off on the player side. It's like, like okay, I got to rip this solo, or maybe there's like
That's
an
fair.
intro that needs the right kind of vibe. It's like when you need that X factor. I feel like that's the thing that like producer engineer brain like can't always do cuz we're trying to rein that in.
That's fair. That's a really good point. Yeah, and you definitely have that. I know you've had Cliff Dorsey on recently, and I really enjoyed his interview. But for anybody listening or viewing, we both now work with Clifford, and I've worked with Clifford for most of a decade now, and he's an awesome songwriter, but and he's an awesome everything, awesome human being too. But what that affords us is the opportunity to play together, and we can finally play together. Now we had a really interesting first gig, but maybe we'll tell that story. You can tell that one. But yeah, but anyways, when I'm on stage with you with Cliff, that's the only time I've ever played with you. And I can definitely feel exactly what you're talking about because you are such a consummate pro. And when you're on stage, you are listening very much. And you're responding to everything, sometimes responding by not playing anything. You're like, let that thing, let that happen. That's beautiful. These are the nuanced thoughts, and you're having a conversation. But then sometimes it's like, well, we need Wilson to carry like 64 bars. And Cliff's just gonna play some rhythm, and you're gonna decide for yourself in that moment what's gonna happen. And especially on that gig, we haven't been working with Clifford together very long, and you've had to fill in or jump in very short notice. So I guess if you didn't have that overdrive, it may not be as easy to get through an experience like that. Where like you had 2 verses and 2 choruses to really familiarize yourself with the progression and how the song should feel, and now you're supposed to step up to the front stage and just like make people believe it. If you don't have a little bit of brashness or cockiness, or dare I say, just a hint of arrogance, smuggler's charm, like a little Han Solo energy. If you
A little
can't,
bravado.
yeah, exactly, yes. And people want to see that. They want to see that. You're right. So, do you think that that is something that is ever? Do you think there's always a moment for that, or have you ever experienced any gigs where like there is no room for anything? Because I do believe those gigs exist. I think I know some people that work those kind of musical jobs. But I was
Oh
curious
yeah.
what your experience with that is. You
Those
ever had like you've been vibed, in other words, because like you found your moment and they're like, it's not that, dude. That's not it. That's not it today.
Personally, I am really grateful to be able to say that most of the gigs that I get called on, there's room for both because people kind of they call me for that certain kind of danger, that certain kind of spice.
Yes.
I don't really get called necessarily for the like we're gonna read down the chart just exactly and there's no solos and we're gonna accompany this singer and like I guess I've done a little bit of that, but everybody was on the same page. There was never like a moment where one person stepped out and like tried to do something
I love those
and then
moments.
got vibed out. That
Yes.
thankfully I haven't had a lot of those, but I don't know. Is that something you've experienced?
Yeah, but mostly as a kid. I was in like very competitive band programs for a while. It's kind of where a lot of things started for me, and they're absolutely and brutally like being in that educational environment was very discipline oriented. Absolutely regret every mistake. So, and after that, I kind of was relieved and then scared to find out that I could totally do that on a lot of the gigs I was doing, especially starting out early on because nobody knew any better. And then you'd like listen back to a cell phone video or some cheap live recording that had been made, and a year to 5 years later, just be horrified by, just like, wow, that drummer is like really trying very hard, like not playing, but like trying. Maybe playing great technically. Just like, dude, this is like Leonard Skinner. So
Right.
you can hack away the metric modulations that you were working on.
Yeah,
You
you
can
don't need that 7 against 4 in the Skynyrd song.
No, you don't. Now, here's an interesting question. Now, let me know if I'm derailing a line that we were just following.
No,
We were
please
talking
derail
about,
away.
well, it's part of my engineer brain that I hate to derail because I feel like I'm gonna regret it later. But okay, fair enough, fair enough. So you were talking about, you don't need that 7/4 thing in a Skinner song. When do you need it, or do you need it ever? Is it even something you should consider? What's your,
Totally. The 7 against 4 thing is a
or anything
convers
like that?
right. It's a conversation amongst musicians. And so it's always like, what am I trying to get at this moment? Because it's not just one thing. It's not just like, okay, I have achieved either good musician or bad musician.
Right,
There's all these different factors. So like there, thinking about a gig, okay, there's money, then there's the hang, and then
right,
there's like the notoriety that you might get. So future gigs, how's it look on my resume, my CV, whatever. So there's at least those like three things. And in terms of like the hang, that's you're bonding with these other musicians, and so maybe you like throw in a 7 against 4 lick even in a situation where it's not the musically correct situation, just because
right.
you're trying to like boost morale, like the rest of the show is going to go better because of that.
Yeah, like, hey, we pulled that off, or hey, like, I get where this individual's coming. You're kind of memeing it away.
Exactly, it's a
No,
meme. It's like, yeah,
it's like
it's telling an inside joke.
it's a musician kind of, it's a mimetic interaction. It's kind of like there are those little things where people will quote solos. I've heard, I think it's Spain, it's a Chick Korea too, like some
Yeah.
really famous phrasing, and I've heard that from a lot of keyboard players. They'll just quote that, or there's the lick in jazz, which Adam Neely's channel is like really popularized and helped like memify. But now you hear, like, I hear it on every jazz record now, and I'm not mad about it
Me neither.
because I think I understand it. It's what you're talking about. Okay, so I'm sorry. So now we were talking about the different aspects of it. The music, the hang, um, and what else did you mention?
Okay, so I guess I would say, so the first category was money. I would say for
Money.
money, it's
I'm so
usually
humble. I
the
didn't even think about
wrong, right. Usually it's the wrong decision to
it.
throw in that 7 against 4 fill money wise, just as a rule. If you had to make a rule, that would be the rule. But then the last thing is like the notoriety, the connections, the like networking aspect of the gig. And there's a story that Questlove tells.
Nice.
Questlove tells this story about he was playing a gig with the Roots, and he decided to employ a whole different style of drumming because there was somebody at the gig in the audience, a producer, somebody I think that he wanted to like send a certain message to, like basically say like, hey, I can do this, even though this isn't normally what this band sounds like. Hey, I can do this. So there might be a situation where you're trying to like make some connection outside the band where you might throw in that 7 against 4 because I don't know, you someone produces that kind of music, progressive, whatever, and you want to send a message.
Yeah, yeah, that's actually something that I haven't really thought about much, but it has happened to me also. It's almost like an actor, right? They're at an audition for like a soda commercial, but they also want to work in the big to ride a horse. Like it's like you're just throwing stuff out there. Like if anybody can just see something in me, like, oh, this really hot, director's gonna be at this thing, and I'm gonna make sure that I find an opportunity to show off this side of myself. And it's like, how did that go for Questlove? Work
Really
out?
well. I think the story
Oh
has a
well,
happy ending. Yeah.
I'm surprised. I mean, obviously Questlove has, he's had a lot of really great moves that he's made. So
Yeah.
I'm
Well,
not
I think
surprised
the
that it went
very
well for Questlove. He's great, but
yeah,
it is a surprising thing when that goes well. I feel like
yeah.
you're not doing the job. At the end of the day, I'm really impressed by the musicianship. And for me, it's more so about like the right musician won't play the drum.
That's true.
I don't really care if you can shred if you're playing with like playing. Like I'm
Right.
impressed by the drummer that knows, or musician in general that knows better. It's like, no, this is a big gig. Like I really need to play this, you know, as advertised.
Right.
But if like, you know, imagine if you were the singer of the gig. You ever witness that? Like you're fronting like like an alternative or indie. pop kind of band, but then like Tom from Slayer walks in and you're like, I gotta scream. You know, like you wouldn't, that would be so jarring and hilarious and it would ruin the music. But musicians, we feel like we can get away with more than singers. And in a way we can, actually.
Yeah, that's true. Because we're speaking a different language. We're a little bit in the background. Even though everyone can hear us, it's more felt what we do.
Yes. And guitar players can hide a little bit, you know, they can kind of roll the volume down a bit. Yep. And just move their hands, like suggest something that, you know, doesn't stick out. I envy that. But right, so what have you experienced that before, where you kind of somebody walked in and it made you change how you played? And if so, who was it? You don't have to name the person, but like who were they to you, and like what did you decide to do? You know, what changed in that moment? You're like, oh, Tim's here. I've got to bust out some like Latin jazz fusion. You know.
Oh, definitely.
He'll call me for a gig sometime.
Well, I definitely if I'm playing bass in a project, usually the big chop to like throw in is usually a slap or a pop.
Yeah. Okay.
And so I definitely have some friends around town, around Gainesville, who like have jammed with me, or people I've known and seen their band or whatever. And if someone I know walks in, I'll throw them a little slap and a pop, like a little eyebrow, like, hey, a little tip of the cap. Even if it is inappropriate, because there's sometimes, you know, we're out here making art and it's supposed to be live and it's supposed to be in the moment, and it's fun to do things like that.
Yeah, I hope if I ever, you know, I'm sure it will happen. I walk into your gig. I hope.
I'll be throwing you a pop.
Yeah, just you know, just one. That's all I have. Count. There was a great smooth jazz station in Gainesville for a long time that I kind of grew up with, called 100.9 Smooth Jazz. I used to love the announcer used to pronounce smooth. He like put some extra stank on it. It sounded kind of silly, like smooth jazz. They used to always say that. Anyways, yeah, that taught me like what slapping a bass was. He would like barely hear the bass. It's like a George Benson tune or something. It's like, whoa, that was awesome. What was that thing? It has the power to like really turn heads when you just jump out to the front like that for just a brief moment. The problem is if you don't go back.
Yeah, you don't want to become slap happy.
No, you want the recipient of the slap to be slap happy. I would be slap happy if you slapped in my direction, but I don't think you're
exactly.
You know,
you have said in the past that the bass is the most beautiful instrument.
It's like really the only good one. Like all the other ones, and you can all fight me. I don't care. It's the only. I wish I'd play. I started playing music when I was 11, and I didn't play anything but drums. I was like hyper focused on drums for a really long time, and I really wish it was bass. I don't regret investing a ton of time in being a drummer. It's incredibly useful, and it's a very unique thing. Rarely do people really. A lot of people start with drums, but so often they end up having a lifelong marriage to guitar, bass, keys. But yeah, like I don't regret it, but I would totally, if I had a time machine, I'd go right past all my embarrassing junior high memories and go straight to 11. Like, let's get a bass. Bass. That's gonna take him somewhere. Yeah, do you agree, or what was your point to that?
Wow. It's just something you famously said, and so I just wanted to bring it up on the show.
I stand by it.
It's good. Good. I'm glad you do. I agree that the bass is the most beautiful instrument. Well, first of all, it would be extremely difficult for me to come up with an answer, and I think that I would come up with some cheeky answer like the most beautiful instrument is the sea. The first instrument played by the earth since time immemorial. Some kind of sound that, like, you know, has always been there. Because if I'm going to really pick a number one instrument, oh my gosh, I mean, I want to say the bass, but then it's like, well, it's not really, you can play high notes, but it's not really made for that. So then what about the guitar? But then I lose. So then do I go in between? Do I go with the baritone? I spent a lot of time. There was a band I had where I just played a guitar and baritone tuning, and I really liked that. But no, I'd have to say, yeah, like the ocean or like thunder or something.
Okay, I mean that's fair. I mean it's a slight cop out, but I get what you mean. You're kind of saying more than answering the question. You're telling me
I
more
would
about
need to cop out,
the
yeah.
philosophy of sound. You're like, you know what, anything's an instrument, and like music is around us. It's not just a human construct, and like perhaps the cosmos is a mathematical structure, and it's, you know, music is sounding mathematics. So everything is some form of music if you zoom out far enough. I mean, it's lofty and whimsical. I get it. That's cool, but
We're
it's
here to get lofty and whimsical.
bass though. It's just bass. So you were saying like because of the limitations to the range. So those like high notes are actually a selling point. That's the best part about the bass. It doesn't play any annoying sounds. Almost every sound the bass makes. See, the sounds that are very low and very, you know, resonant or percussive, I have a lot of low end frequency. You know, they hit you from like, you know, like sent like the navel to like the breastplate here. Like there's just that range of where you physically feel all of these sounds that matter, and then everything else doesn't matter. So, which is, I'm just kidding. No, they all matter. I'm an engineer. I make
That's so
stuff.
funny. Yeah.
I'm just taking it too far, but no. As far as like, you know, I guess it depends on how you determine it. I would say when I take the bass away, that makes the most negative impact for me as far as my enjoyment. If you take the bass away, like how many people have you heard like drive by just like mega subs, right?
Mega subs.
Right, like very serious, you know,
But
bass.
huge tweeters would be terrible. Huge tweeters, you just like hear
Yeah,
nothing but hi hat.
yeah, that's not something you expect, like just a cicada,
Yeah.
you know. Although I have seen people with like really crappy PA speakers on top of their rides, like just doing that. And I guess that to circumvent laws about however they measure the loudness has something to do with like low end, because for so long the issue has been people with like huge amps and massive, you know, subs and things like that. So like people figured that they could still play the music obnoxiously loud, which is I guess in their case the point, but you know, just like without the low frequency. Right. And you could, it's like you kind of loopholing it. I've heard that as an explanation. I could just be straight up ignorant about it. But to be fair, that has happened. I've heard a few people with just like a hi hat, you know, and like you just hear everything above like the kick drum. That's about it.
Oh, hi hats. That's a good question. You play also with famously large hi hats. How did you start doing that? What's the deal with the hi hats?
I feel like it's probably most drummers have at some time or another, just like, so I've had like just two crash cymbals that were kind of the same size, and like their hi-hat stand, like, and it's fun because it's different and it has a much lower sound and it's much bigger and you don't have to try as hard to hit it. There's more surface area on a cymbal, which means there's more variety, more nuance that you can get out of it. So I mean, you know, you try it for a while, but then like you're a kid or you're a young drummer. If you started later in life, you're still a young drummer, and so you're playing with a lot of records, and you haven't maybe developed your voice yet and your adaptation. So all these records have hi hats that sound totally different. You're still trying to figure out what the drummers on the records you're playing are doing. So the fact that it sounds different is making it really difficult for you to emulate and develop a style. So you end up going back to like the 14-inch hi hats that everybody plays. And so that happened with me. And then I have to give some credit to a really cool dude named Zach Brown. Not Zach Brown of Zach Brown Band that sings Chicken Fried, although that would be sick if he taught me something about hi-hats. But Zach is a drummer. I think he's a working drummer in LA now, but he came by Black Bear Recording Studios where I worked and did a session with some friends. Like asked for these 16-inch hi-hats. He wanted 16-inch hi-hats. They're usually 14 to 15 inches. 16 is where crash cymbals kind of start. So he asked for some 16s, which has been like slightly large, but we didn't have two 16s that sounded good together, so I gave him some 18s. So your hi-hats are now 4 inches, in diameter, larger than the standard 14-inch hi-hat pair. And then I sat in the control room and just listened as I recorded, and it sounded so awesome. And I remembered how much fun it was as a kid to like play really big cymbals, and I just been doing it ever since. I think it's something that we all play with, but I have to say Zach Brown's insistence on doing that, and then the happy accident that I only really had 18-inch cymbals there, kind of led to me getting inspired. And it's really been a good conversation starter, if nothing else. I don't know if anybody would ever really notice just by the sound, but people look at it and do a double take, and it's fun. And I constantly think about going bigger and bigger cymbals until somebody's like, dude, get those off the stage. That's embarrassing. Stop. I want to see how far I can push that.
Am I right that you use a combination of two different grips on the stick?
Oh yeah, yeah. I think you should. It's fun. You just mean like the holding? Yeah, because I play like the traditional, like the flipped over. People think of marching drummers and the old rock and roll drummer.
Right.
Right. It's a personal thing. A lot of drummers don't play traditional grips at all. I'm just lucky that I learned it. I say that because it's fun.
So
Yeah,
that's like a marching band chop?
yeah, I think the original was like, five and bugle corps or whatever the earliest like marching drummers were. Probably like, regimental drummers. Back in the day, we used to have drummers on the battlefield that were actually playing drums while getting shot at, which is so hardcore. And I do actually really love, I'm proud of that as a drummer, that a lot of the rudiments, literally we call them that, the rudiments of drumming, a lot of those have a history, like really intense discipline, like under fire. It's pretty crazy. But you would have a drum kind of slung over your shoulder, like a sash or something, and the angle of the drum would not be parallel to the ground. It'd be slung over a shoulder. So if you tried to hold your stick, you kind of like, playing like that. So you just flip it over. And it's a really terrible mechanic. Like it's not optimal for drumming. From just like a purely ergonomic standpoint. But because of that, you play differently, and that's kind of nice. But I don't know. Do you see a lot of drummers that do that? I kind of felt like that's a pretty common thing, but maybe it's not. I don't really play with other drummers, so.
I would agree with you. I see most people just, is it Matchstick? Is that what it's called? The rock and roll?
Match grip. Yep.
Match grip. I see mostly that. Really just like straight overhand. But I don't know. It definitely looks cool, that traditional grip.
Mm. It's a little pretentious when I use it sometimes. I know this looks serious.
Even on the country gig, even playing with Cliff, I see you doing some of that traditional gig.
Yeah, it's kind of like it's less of a genre thing and more of like a genre. It's more about the genre of the drummer, like what type of drummer that person is, more their pedigree, where they come from, where they started, who they learned from. If you were like a jazz player, you learned traditional, probably. Now, it doesn't mean you play traditional. There's like guys like Bill Stewart, tons of incredible and like modern drummers today, jazz cats that are like not playing traditional. They probably can. They don't. So you can definitely be awesome without it. But if you were in a marching band program, if you were in a high school jazz band, a collegiate jazz band, or if you just grew up idolizing like Gene Krupa and the old swing drummers, then yeah, you probably wanted to look like them, do all that cool floppy arm stuff, and, like. But if you didn't have a particular reason to emulate that, then you could go your entire life and be totally happy this way. You might even avoid some tendonitis out of it. So, but it's cool. There's different shades. Do you notice a difference? I don't know how often you've played with a drummer that plays both grips interchangeably a lot, but do you notice any difference in the feel or the sound when a drummer is using a different grip?
Not in the sound, but I feel like what you end up playing is a little bit different because you're in that other position. Also, like if I want to reach over and play a tom, I've got to really like move my whole body to get my hand up on top of that drum and then come down, as opposed to if I have the matchstick, it's like bah, I go right to it. So I see people playing kind of different stuff, but the tone doesn't really sound different. I wouldn't say it makes it sound more jazz or more anything, just where they're going to play is different.
Right. Okay. So you mean more so in terms of like orchestration,
Exactly.
the ergonomic aspect of like moving your arms around, with this motion as opposed to overhand. What about the like the time feel, like placement of beats? You feel like, I think with some people maybe it is more noticeable than others.
Okay. So my guess would be that it would give you a slightly earlier snare sound because you're down closer to the snare.
That's
So
a
you're
good
not
point.
covering as much distance. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, that is true. I mean, I think it does depend on how you play it. 'Cause you can generate a ton of speed and power that way. But I guess because like this part of your wrist doesn't like it goes like that, and you've got to kind of compensate to get the drumstick vertical. Where this like you can just hold smash, So
Right.
you've got your entire arm's length to just hit stuff. So yeah, you might actually end up playing much louder this way, and you might also, because of that, be a little late, which is not good. What would you rather have, a drummer that's a little late or a drummer that's way too loud?
Oh,
Asking for
definitely. Wow. Drummer that's a little late. Drummer that's way too loud. Late, better. Yeah, loud. The loud drummer, man. I'm sorry. Like, I don't. My younger self is wanting to be on your side and be like, yeah, play those drums loud. But
yeah.
I just, every day that goes by, I'm just like, do you have to play the drums so loud?
So you would prefer, maybe a slightly choppy meter, maybe not the best groove, to somebody that just overplays the band in the ring.
It would depend if he's early. Like if he's choppy but he's late, then I'm like, okay, I can work with this. But if he's choppy
That's
but he's
important.
early, that's a problemo.
Why do you say that?
Because I'm not ready. It's like I'm preparing a party. You're gonna come at like it's like the party's at 7. You're gonna come at 7. Like the dip isn't even out yet.
Dude, yeah. What can I do?
Oh man. We recently made like a spinach and artichoke that was to die for.
Okay, okay. I would try it. I would try it on your recommendation. Not a spinach guy. I don't know if I've ever had artichokes. So.
What are your go-to dips?
Oh man, I'm so basic. I don't even know that I like salsa. I like chili. I like nacho standard nacho dips. Basically, I don't dip a lot of things. I'm not a big dipper. You could say I'm a little dipper. Like a middle dipper. I don't really dip a lot. Um, I don't know like, what else is there. This is a whole world that so much more about the world of. I mean, I guess ranch is that a dip? That's a dressing, but you can drip. Okay, so if you dip something in ranch dressing, does it become a dip, or was it always?
I think yes. If you dip something in it, it becomes a dip. Period. That goes for more than just ranch.
Fair enough. Fair enough. So then, realistically, I could say jelly,
You could say jelly, jam, peanut butter.
yeah, preserves.
Well, the real question is guacamole. See, me personally, I don't really like avocado. So for me, guacamole, that's kind of a no for me. What about you? Also a no.
Hard pass. Yeah, I'm not doing it.
Man after
There's
my own
a
heart.
there's a price. Everybody has a price. You can pay me enough to eat guacamole, but you're not going to. So it's not going to happen. Like if somebody really just needed me to like eat some guacamole, I mean, I think about like $500 when they do it. It's like how much guacamole do you have to eat? It's not too much.
How much? Let's really make a measurement here. So, $500.
Yeah.
Like, how much guacamole would you eat? Because at a certain point, it becomes no again. Because if I'm like, okay, you got to eat so much guacamole, you die, probably a no. But somewhere in between,
Yeah, that's a
like
hard.
one bite and there,
I'd say Wilson. I would. So there's a lot of food items you could order at a restaurant that would come with like a proportionate amount of guacamole. Somehow it's like a topping and ingredient in the food. Like say you go to Taco Bell, you get a burrito. I tell them no fiesta, which is funny because it means no party. But like apparently that's how I was told to order Taco Bell if you don't want the pico de gallo and just guacamole. So like I would eat a dish that features guacamole prominently. I would eat one entire meal serving of that for maybe. If it's Taco Bell, I like Taco Bell. I make like four. If somebody wanted me to like really consume just guacamole, like that's an easy grand. And if there's not like some kind of overpowering drink like soda to help me, like you could use acid to wash that down. That would be easy with mine too.
yeah, I'm with you. Maybe, yeah, because maybe I like to live on the edge, so maybe I would eat some, like if you're just throwing down ramekins of guac.
You say
Like,
ramekins?
ramekins.
What's a ramekin?
A ramekin, like a little sauce cup.
No, I'm learning a lot from you today, man. So is that like what sort of what tradition does that come from? What's the origin?
Ramekin. I have no idea. Let
Oh,
me see. Ramekin. Where does that come from? I'm gonna
that's
search it
not.
up on the show. No, I'm actually gonna do it.
I can need the word.
The other day we did Brunswick stew, we were talking about Brunswick stew, and we learned on air exactly what Brunswick stew is, and it might surprise you. Check out my episode with Ethan Allen to find
I,
out.
I've started that one. I've watched, I think, up to there so far in the mind butter
Nice.
series. So yeah, okay. I will be tuning in to that. New Brunswick. Ramekin.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean,
Oh wow.
ramekin.
Okay, so do you want to guess the language of origin? It would surprised me.
I mean, it sounds like perhaps a Slavic word or something.
Well, if you saw it, so here's the deal. If you saw it spelled, your answer would be super different.
Can you give me the first three letters?
Well, the first three letters aren't super surprising, but here's where it gets surprising is there's a Q in there. It's Ramequin.
Is it Argentine? Argentinian? Is
Nope.
it perhaps?
Argentisinal.
Is it perhaps? Let me see. Is that a Q there? Is it Taiwanese?
Nope. It's actually French.
Wow, man, I really should have known that. I don't speak French, but I once lived with somebody who did.
Oh man, wait, wasn't the first thing you said was Dutch? Didn't you say Dutch?
No, I said Argentinian,
Oh,
and I was thinking about asking if it was from Canada as well.
So the French term is
that would have been close. Canada would have been close.
The French term is in turn derived from early modern Dutch ramekin, which translates to toast or roasted minced meat. So the real OG ramekins, it sounds like, were bowls made of food.
That's the thing, huh?
Yep, I guess so.
I guess why not? I guess you just set it right on the table and your food is just touching the table there. Maybe you have a plate that's also made of food, but at some point you're just wasting food or contaminating it. That's my take on it.
Yeah, that's a hot take.
I mean, if your food is just resting on the table, we use plates to separate it from the table. So if the plate or the bowl is made of food, then there's a certain amount of food that's now just, where Uncle Ted's like slimy elbow was just.
That's true. That's a rabbit hole.
I would need to see an illustration, like perhaps they had some sort of cantilever system or something.
It's hanging from the ceiling, exactly.
Well, yeah, it's like a potted plant. You like poke the ramekin. So this somehow became like a bowl. So that's why we assume it's a bowl made of meat, because it describes meat, but we know it ended up being like a little sauce dish.
Right.
So naturally, we just assume it's some sort of dish made of some sort of thing. So yeah, your question was ramekins. I had no point of reference for that, but yeah, I mean, like I'm gonna go ahead and just guess like four ramekins max, and we're going up on the price. Like if this was Fear Factor, I could do it, but that pays pretty well. Oh, it did, I think. Rest in peace, Fear Factor. It's great.
I'm with you. Well, Logan, this has been awesome. I think that's probably a good place to end it. But before we do, you've got to deliver your positive message to the listeners of the day.
Message to the listeners of the day. Oh, wow. Okay. Well, I didn't prepare one, so they're really in for a good one, I suppose. Well, listeners, thank you for spending your time. It's very gracious to have me. So yeah, if I had a positive message, I guess that really would be, this is where, I'm a cynic, man, because I'm like really struggling. I haven't thought about that in like 6 years.
You could give me a cynical message.
Oh, no, I wouldn't do that. No, honestly, like, I think the most positive, like, personal, like overarching personal development that's happened for me in the last few years of my life has been kind of self-actualization. And I think what was hugely positive for me was realizing that that's even possible. But after a certain point, like I just kind of decided that I wanted to do this as much as possible. And if you have the luxury of doing that, maybe not even full time as a career, but even just like if you can be a weekend warrior in something that really means a lot to you, I think that is worth the time. It's really an investment in a hobby or a lifelong, pursuit or art form or whatever. I think that is an investment in yourself ultimately. and can carry you through a lot of turbulence in life. And not everybody's able to just quit their job and go try to do their favorite thing and get money for it all the time. But if you can find a space in your life for arts or any kind of pursuit that connects you to others, and connects you to yourself in a deep way, people maybe kind of give you the impression maybe whatever you want to do with your time is not the most productive thing. And I've certainly, even just being a musician, like you've probably faced some of that, like your parents really know, if your parents aren't musical. So, but whatever your thing is, unless it's really dangerous or irresponsible, in which case, please stop now. You could probably do it. You could probably do it. Like, will you be famous or rich? Statistically, not. But like there's a lot of people. Just take musicians and music industry people. Like, there's a lot of people making like a living that you will possibly never know about, but they are happy, and they get professional recognition, artistic validation, and a great community. So I don't know, man. It's easy to get discouraged. Not necessarily that all your listeners are trying to be professional musicians, but everybody is doing something with their life, and it's challenging. So if there was a way to sum all that up, I'd say you can never really know the potential that a venture has, and if you feel really passionate about it, it's okay to set your sights to something realistic. I think it's better to maybe realize you're not going to be as likely to be, like Bill Gates, but you could have a fantastic life. And really, it's when I mentioned self-actualization, it's like, hey, for me, that meant one thing. It could be something different for everybody. For me, it meant just being able to decide for myself like what was important to use with my time. Because I only know for a fact that I get one existence, one go around. So it's like this time is worth like billions of dollars a second. So if you feel really passionate about something, I think it's a bigger risk to not risk it than to like try to imagine like a good future, but maybe a sustainable future. Maybe, you can definitely burn out if you expect to shoot straight to the top of something, or if you hold yourself to like an all-time great standard. Or so strive for excellence. Like, imagine a way that you could have a balanced relationship with your favorite thing. Maybe someday people will like pay you. You can get that sweet Taco Bell with music money or graphic design or whatever you do. Like, that's the sweetest Taco Bell of all. Even if they didn't throw your fire sauce in there.
Amen. Well, thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, Logan Fischer.
Ladies and gentlemen, Wilson Stern, thank you, buddy. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.